Lord have mercy. Let's see if we can do this. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 45 Minutes of Noise, but a relatively different one to our usual regime and situation. Kris on holiday in Thailand with his girlfriend and a couple of friends. Very lucky to him. And I am sort of picking up the mantle as host for a couple of weeks, and I'm joined by the very gracious, seemingly always busy Jac Holloway, who obviously runs Noise. He's a bit of the head honcho and CEO of Noizze Publications. And it's just wonderful to have you aboard to talk about some music, Jac. How are you?
Good. I feel weird without us introducing you as Mr. Cynical himself. But it just feels like something, and there's accent missing as well. That was a better intro than the first intro you gave me before we fucked up our first, first
Yeah,
try at
there's
this.
yeah, like anything else, the second take is often
I enjoyed that one.
often better than the first one. And yeah, I'm less wolves around you than I am around Kris, which is
There
probably
is a noticeable difference. Yeah, apologies to the listeners for what they're
for the
going to
relief of
hear.
everybody.
Sam hasn't changed. He's still the same. It's just a
Yeah,
tonal shift.
all for the chagrin and sadness of everybody listening. Sam hasn't changed. I'm really sorry.
I'm okay
But
though. I didn't answer that. I'm good.
oh
I'm
yeah,
I- I'm
sorry.
I'm excited to be pushed out of my comfort zone for the next two or three episodes of into
Yeah,
into
I
realms of
think
music.
pushed is more of an understatement. I think kicked out of the moving car that is your comfort zone is probably more appropriate to what's going on, especially today.
Yeah.
Before we delve into the two records that we're going to be doing today, I'd like to personally thank Liquid Death for murdering our thirst or thirsting our murder, which is what I was about to say. Just a big shout out to those guys for all the work they do for us and everybody else at the moment. So yeah, so before we do that, we're going to move right back on. We've got a couple of albums to discuss today. One is from the band Siamese. We're going to be reviewing their sixth new studio album, Elements, which comes out on the 9th of August. And we're also going to be talking about Kurokuma of Amber and Sand, which is the debut record on For the Lost Records, and that's coming out on August the 9th already. I'm going to jump just right into it, Jac. We're going to be talking about Siamese. It's as I said, sixth record via Long Branch Records. This band are from Denmark, and they have 60 million streams on Spotify, which is absurd for a band that I learned about 2.5 days ago. Um, Jac, what are your prior experiences with Siamese, if anything? Was this the first delve for you?
Uh, yeah, no prior experience. In terms of a full studio album. Um, I think it's probably fair to say they fall within the ilk of bands that are your Bad Omens, your Sleep Tokens, your Architects, you bring these, and they're kind of there's a few bands that I think have latched onto that and sort of run with it. Haven't listened to a full album before. They're a band that isn't shy of putting a sample of pop music in, of kind of lacing pop music with big riffs. I think where they've come from a place where they've been rooted in post-hardcore, they've, as we'll discuss momentarily, they've kind of there's been a bit of a shift from what I gather on this record. Um, but yeah, not much prior experience to be honest.
No, no, me neither. And I sort of read through the information here and thought to myself, okay, there's clearly something building with this band. In terms of the touring with Korn and Corey and Nothing More and Beartooth and sort of being played all over the radio and obviously the streaming. They're doing a massive tour dates as well. They're playing, it seems like every major city in Central Europe between May and August. So they seem to be really sort of working hard at building a continual following. And then when you listen to the record, I think it's abundantly clear that these guys are thoroughly intent on attacking the demographic that Sleep Token and Bad Omens and those bands are really sort of nailing and mastering the art of at the moment. You can very much see that there is I always call it deliberate attempt because that's almost underselling it. It's almost like missile accurate targeted towards this nightclub expansive chorus metal pop sort of fusion that appears to be sort of taking over the music industry in alternative music over the last few months. How did this sit with you? Because I know you're a big fan of Bad Omens, a big fan of Sleep Token, a big fan of Bring Me the Horizon. So I'm coming to you as somebody who really this should be right in the demographic of. Did you listen to this and think, oh, just a band trying to do the same thing as these three or four bands that I like? Or did you see this as, oh, great, this is another band doing something that three or four bands that I really like are doing, and this shows the music is going in the right direction, and this is just more of things I enjoy. Which sort of side of the fence did you sit on?
All of them at different points of the album, to be honest with you. Absolutely, you're right. On paper, this is absolutely a bit of me. And I kind of it changed. There was certain elements in some of the songs that I was like, yes, more of that. Give me more of that. There's I think some of the songs have been released. I think there's Vertigo, Predator, Chemistry.
Okay.
They're tracks 2, 3, 4, all been released so far. And I think Through My Head, which is the fifth track, has been released as well. Um, Opener, I'm fully in. I'm like, this is this. It's got that stompy riff. It's got that big breakdown section. There's no surprises. It's everything that you expect. It sounds a little bit like Animals from Architects. We'll let that slide. It's got that kind of. He's got a really high range and great vocals, but it's kind of. Am I jaded? Am I jaded by this genre of music unless it's done to an impeccable standard? Like that's the question I'm asking myself going in.
Mhm.
But I enjoyed it. Like it was fun. There's parts of it that are really experimental. I don't think the features really added much. I know of the bands 1056 and Resolve, proper decent bands. I don't think it brought anything in that I was like, that moment was huge. Um, and yeah, it's a solid record, but does it hit that upper echelons of what Bad Omens and Bring Me have achieved in the last year or so? No. But is there some moments that I think if this band leaned into that, would it do them some real good? Yeah. I mean, what I liked about it is there's tracks On Fire, one of my personal highlights. It's a club song. It's masquerading as metal. There's some riffs in there. It's got a dubstep breakdown. Do you remember dubstep, Sam? Do
Vaguely,
you remember that?
vaguely.
Do you remember that period of
I
university?
think yeah, I think was everyone into Skrillex for about 6 months. I think
Yeah.
everyone loved Skrillex for six
And
months.
then he
That's what it
did
felt
that. He
like.
did that. They did that album. Korn did that album. It wasn't solely with Skrillex, but I think they had a Skrillex feature or two.
Mm.
Remember that? I
I
do.
do. I do.
It was a weird
I
time.
enjoyed this in parts too. I enjoyed this. It was a weird time. I enjoyed this in parts too. Yeah, I enjoyed this in the same way that you enjoy like action movies, and it's like if you just like watch The Expendables and suspend your disbelief at these 70-year-old blokes somehow being needed to end some crime ring in Colombia or whatever, then you can just enjoy the quips and the fight scenes and the explosions. Um, in the same kind of way, and it feels a little bit. It feels a little bit like that, but I I think. I was talking to a friend last night about metal music, and I was like, some metal is just pop music in Halloween costume, and that's what it feels that this is. So yeah, you have to sort of listen to it, uh, not necessarily anticipating a purely heavy record, but also not necessarily anticipating a purely pop record because at the poppy parts, it's uh shameless in its adherence to like traditional pop um the pop style. Like if this is something like On Fire, like that is a club song with a riff in. Like that is not a metal song. That is a club pop song with some guitar attached to it. And you get the same kind of thing the moment you listen to songs like Vertigo and the opener Shape of Water and Chemistry, which sounded like a mix of like LaRue's Bulletproof if she was also into gent and stuff. So
I mean,
there's
I
a
hope
lot there's a
I'm just
lot
going to
go
put it out there. I hope LaRue is into gent. Uh, that would be great.
if she yeah, I think so. I think so too. I think there's a chance. I think there's a chance. There's something about wearing a latex suit of armor and having a ginger mohawk that makes me think there's a chance she likes Periphery. Can't rule
Definitely
it
a
out
chance.
entirely.
Yeah,
Uh,
totally agree.
um,
Did you clock that God is a Woman is a cover song of the very popular Ariana Grande song?
I didn't even know there was an Ariana Grande song called God is a Woman.
I knew you wouldn't, which is why I brought it up because I thought it's a real. It's
To embarrass me for our audience. Nice one, Jack.
oh, check this, everyone. Sam doesn't even know who Ariana Grande is.
I know who she is. I couldn't name a single song.
You've said enough. No, I mean the reason I bring it up is because
I've
if
said enough.
if that's not enough of a an indication of their intent for what they want this album to be, covering covering a popular song, and which is done. It's not unheard of. Like you check out YouTube covers, there's almost a rock or metal cover of almost every pop song. And to include it on a studio recording, I think gives a really clear indication of what the band are trying to achieve here. And you're absolutely right. That's the point I was going to pick out. It's totally shameless. Like this is what they set out to do, and they've done
Hmm.
it well. And where I've seen them popping up in the past, where I've picked out the odd song here or there, is because something's blown up, and that absolutely is indicated in the amount of streams that they've got as well. They're looking to have big hooks and big vocals that, whilst they probably themselves know isn't necessarily groundbreaking, they know if they put enough cool elements and moments in it that there's going to be something that captures people, even if it's a 15-second TikTok viral thing that goes off. There's loads of moments in here that could potentially do that. Yeah, I think it's fun. Um, and it's a bit middle of the road, but it's got some really cool moments in it. What did you think of the last song, aptly named "This Is Not a Song"?
um, I
Did
I
you?
enjoyed it. I enjoyed it for what it was intended to be, which was like a entertaining little mosh
Oh, you
call at the
know they're
end.
playing that live. Like that's going to be their live staple,
Yeah,
either before the encore or it's going to come on middle of the way through, and then it's going to kick into a popular song of theirs, and it's going to go off. It'll go absolutely off. It was just a
yeah.
big breakdown.
Yes, yeah, and I can see it working for a sort of festival crowd.
Yeah.
Um, although I'd be interested to see like how my assumptions on the fandom for this band to go see them live, and then my assumption of what classic metal mosh pits look like. I'd be interested to see if there's like a crossover.
It's interesting though because I
Um,
did I did download this year, and unfortunately, Electric Callboy had to pull out. Have you have you listened to much Electric Callboy?
I have heard them enough to not consider it unfortunate that they pulled out.
I, for one, have started to really get into baby metal and Electric Callboy, and I think this is a good place to announce it. And look, I've got a 6-year-old who loves it. My 2-year-old doesn't mind it. They did a song
It's
together.
not an
I can't get them.
excuse.
Oh, wait, it is.
No, it isn't. It isn't. My music taste been adjusted because a 6-year-old likes it is bullshit.
I'm just enjoying it, so I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, you can. I respect your honesty, but that's the only thing I respect. And
There's a point in there though. Both of those
oh,
bands were
good.
slated
Sorry.
for, I believe, I might be wrong. I believe both of those bands were slated for the main stage, and there was some really different alternative bands on this year. It was a really notable difference this year in terms of what bands they were putting on, because as we know, as time goes by, it's going to be harder and harder to get the classic metal bands, but there was still a really good reception to it. And I think someone like, a band like Siamese actually sits comfortably within the mix of bands that would still get quite heavily moshed to and would get a generally good reception even at a festival. Because something's got to change there, hasn't it, at some point? And I think it will. Um,
Yeah, I think we're getting to the point now where metal has stopped being so careful to take itself seriously as much.
yeah,
And
I like that one.
I think like there's always been an area, especially at festivals, where there's always been like the time taken for the silly bands like the Steel Panthers of the world. That's
Oh yeah,
despite
fuck Steel Panther.
oh right, so taking the mick out of themselves in that context annoys you, but Electric Callboy's fine, got it. Um
I'm selective.
yeah, you're hypocritical is another word for that. But
Selective.
but like there's always been a section of the metal fandom that has like appreciated the silliness that can be associated with it and the enjoyable juxtaposition between very heavy music and very light-hearted content. I mean, there's pirate metal and dwarf metal and let's pretend we're in a tribe metal and Mongolian throat singer metal. Like we've kind of jumped off the board of whatever ramifications you can put on with a riff, to be honest. So like complaining or anything like that. This is just the way that the industry is sort of moving. And to bring it back to sort of Siamese, you have to go in and just accept that this is a pop push to appeal to a certain type of crowd and certain demographic of metal fans, and then evaluate it that way. You can't be evaluated by like comparing it to like a Machine Head record. It just makes no sense because they're not appealing to the same people. Or maybe they are appealing to a very small Venn diagram of people that like Machine Head and stuff like this, but it would be a small Venn diagram, I would assume. So when you look through that kaleidoscope, when you actually look at what they're doing, you think to yourself, okay, are they successful in what they're intending to do? And if you see this as a pop metal record, if that is such a thing, then this is a very effective pop metal record. This is an album that has almost been fed into AI. If you fed like Bring Me the Horizon, Sleep Token, and Bad Omens, and just said, please generate 10 songs that would appeal to this group of people, because it is so polished and so well tailored to this particular demographic, that it could be like the poster boy of that genre, almost. And it's incredibly effective in that. It's hard, like you listen to this, and A Shape of Water is powerful and thumping. It's filthy breakdown at the end, really good. And the chorus is great. Same with Vertigo. Predator is architect style interlude. I can see it being popular in clubs up and down the country. And I felt the same pretty much about every single tune on this record. There isn't a single song here that is designed to distract the listener away from anything other than its primary objective, which is to be as popular and as accessible and as consumable as possible. And when you look through it that lens, it is hard to argue that it is anything other than a B grade 8 out of 10 version of that specific thing. Um, and I assume, as you talk about, as download and festivals are moving ever and ever to what I would describe as like party bands, this type of stuff is gonna gain steam. It seems perfectly built for the Instagram reel, TikTok style approach to sort of sharing music where things are condensed down to their absolute base. Like front loading with the choruses and all that type of stuff because um that's the way that the streaming industry sort of promotes music now and things like that. So that appears to be the sort of the direction that we are going, and this is just representative of that. I enjoyed it listening through. I had a fun time listening to it. It's not something I'm going to revisit, but at the same time, I'm not supposed to. Like I'm not the demographic necessarily that they are trying to win over. I don't come from a place where I'm enjoying bands like Electric Callboy or Baby Metal or Bad Omens. Really, I'm not in that demographic. I like Bring Me the Horizon, but the earlier the better. I like Sleep Token, but the earlier the better. And this is the sort of same thing, really, where they're moving away from that. But if I was into that music regularly, and if my iPod or my Spotify account or whatever it was full of music in this ilk, I can't see a world where this doesn't appeal to me directly and this doesn't win me over. You can't judge it by what it isn't. You have to judge it by what it is, and what it is a great success within the confines of what it is trying to achieve. So for that purpose, it can't be anything other than a successful, good, surely accessible, consumable, and popular metal record or pop metal record, alternative record, whatever catch-all phrase that we use to describe this genre at the moment. Then shall we move forward? Let's talk about Kurokuma. I hope I'm getting that right. Kurokuma of Amber and Sand, which is a debut record
I don't.
off the.
It's their second off my head.
Oh, are you sure? Because the notes say will
Sure
return
it
with
is.
their new record. Where did I get
Sam
debut
hasn't
then?
read the press notes.
Yes, I have. Shut up. I just misread. Their debut was Born of Obsidian, and this one is the second one of Amber and Sand. Right, okay, I misread. My mistake. So it is their second record um, um, of Amber and Sand, a follow-up from their recorded debut, Born of Obsidian. And it is a concept album based on the concept of time. So their previous record was based on ancient history of Mesoamerican civilizations, and this one is about the significance of time as it relates to the human experience. Now, Jack, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about this because I
Yeah.
know the kind of music listener you tend to be. So, at what point were you like, "Oh God"? Was it the phrase "vicious psych trio"? Was it the frame "fresh heaviness to the extreme music scene"? Was it the phrase "debut album born of Obsidian"? Was it "it's not sludgy, it's not doom, it's not death metal, it's Kurokuma"? Was it the phrase their debut album dug deep into ancient history of Mesoamerican civilization? Because that's a bold start. Like you're coming out the gates thinking Mesoamerican civilization is our priority here for a theme. And then when you read the colossal concept of time, at what point were you like, I'm gonna have to strap myself in for an hour of not really sure what's gonna go on? Like this could be anything between incredibly amazing and transferable, but it also could be something that I'm just gonna dread for 50 minutes. Like, which of those phrases sort of jumped out to you as the most nerve-wracking when you were reading that?
All of them second to the track listing and its length on certain songs, of course. And I want to preface this with the fact that I decided to listen to this on my morning commute because that is an important factor.
That's important information.
That is important in terms of understanding the pre context for this
Yeah.
this listen.
And the subsequent police report that was filed.
Yeah. And the journey that it took me on, emotionally, physically, spiritually. Uh, yeah, I mean, do you want me to tell you how I feel about it?
I would like you to tell me how you feel about it. Yeah.
I was pleasantly surprised at this album. Like
Right.
I I I would stretch to say I enjoyed every second half of every song. Um, because
That's not as big a compliment as you think it is.
it's not. I mean, well, there's loads of factors in it. I mean, reading the press notes, God, I love me a concept album. Chuck me in a couple of transitions, I'm on board. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
like a lot of music that has a variety of influences or isn't afraid of putting in, something totally different. Now, I'm sure I heard, like, I don't know what the instrument was that I heard in the bridge section of song number one. What is song number one? I Am Forever. Uh, I'm sure that was like is that a sitar? That is what I wrote with a question mark. Is that it? In that kind of,
Yeah.
is
It
that a
had like
sitar?
a traditional Eastern feel to some of the guitar work.
Yeah, give me more sitar in extreme music. That's what I want to say. Uh, it will also surprise you to know, sidebar, that recently, thanks to the Olympic performance of Gojira, I revisited their two of their albums.
Which albums?
Fortitude, is
Okay, good.
that the newest one?
Yeah.
And whatever the other one is that everyone loves.
Narrows it down.
Magma. Is it Magma?
Magma's really good, yes.
Yeah, both of those albums. And I found
Mm.
myself quite enjoying the what I would have previously described as quite progressive, brawling, not needed, uh, lengthy sections of guitar riffing. Um,
Mm.
so it kind of set me up well for this, in the sense that I was more patient for those 2 minute intros that every song seems to have, and that build. Uh, and I don't know, it kept me on my toes enough. Yeah, I mean, I'm all over the shop, but I really enjoyed this record. I'm stretched to say that. There was enough.
Wow.
There was enough in there for me that it didn't just feel like a full frontal assault. And I mean, neither of us have the context of what the first album sounded like. But on the press notes, Noizze is there saying how good this is. I don't know if you noticed that.
Yeah, crucial listening, we called it.
Yeah. So as a Noizze collective, I know that this is crucial listening. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't know if they kind of went that far and experimented that much in the first album, but if they did, I'd be keen to listen to it. Some of that Middle Eastern influence and some of what they were trying to explore in it, I was all about it. And the reason that I said I enjoyed the second half of every song because it felt like it really got going at that point. It starts to build and get interesting. There's tempo changes. There was different vocal styles. I found it it did enough for me not to just be blast beats and this kind of wall of sound, and there was enough chopping and changing and tempo changes and things like that. That yeah, enjoyed.
Wow.
I mean, every between every song, there's an interlude. Got annoyed at the first couple because I felt like extend those into. If you're going to do long songs, right, do long interludes. Like, why are you afraid of that? There's the first interlude is Sandglass, and it's got this like African drumming like thing that starts to happen at the end of it. I'm like, yeah, come on, let's go. And that's going to lead into an intro on the next song. Doesn't just cut short. Give me more bongo, Kurokuma. Give me more bongo. Because that going into I wanted some like Sepultura roots kind of vibe, like, and it was great, but it's just on the second half of the album, it feels like the interludes, because there is literally an interlude between every song. It feels like those interludes started to really come together. And I was interested. I just felt myself interested as to where it was going to go until the last track. But maybe I'll talk about that separately in a minute after you've talked about some of your thoughts.
That is genuinely surprising. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought you'd hate every second of this. Because it is at times meandering, it is at times slow, and it is at times like strangely disjointed, and the interludes actually don't do as much interluding as you'd think. They kind of feel like separate parallel sounds going on while an album is going on in
That's
between in the
what I was trying to
background.
get at. Yeah, absolutely. You've
Like
explained it
like
way better. Yeah.
bell tower, like cool. But why doesn't the bell continue into the first riff and then it
Where's the
has
bell?
this sort yeah, like it just
Where's the bell?
happens.
Where's the bongo? I totally agree with you. Continue.
Bell and bongo return. But yeah, like that was the sort of thing to me. It kind of felt rather than it didn't feel like a concept album in the traditional sense where everything feels very tailored and sort of there's a tapestry of sound that's all popped together. It kind of feels like separate ideas that are probably maybe linked together through the theme of the lyrics or some of the ideas presented through that. But from a musical standpoint, the first thing you think of in I Am Forever is holy shit, these are heavy. Like immediately you're like, oh, this is like if Sepultura and Down had a baby and like immediately started feeding it carbs and making it smoke weed all the time. And it just became
Can you
like a
imagine? Can you imagine what that
sludgy
sounds like
grimer.
live? Oh my god, that's going to be so dense. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah, just huge, just absolutely
mm.
huge. And I agree with you that the sort of interesting interlude with the crushing riffs not bad at all. The tribal ending was really really positive. Um, moving on to sort of Death No More, the slow build was a nice disparate riff. It was
Uh,
offsetting. It was an interesting transition.
that didn't need a 3 minute fucking intro though.
No, it didn't. It was
I got angry at that one.
challenging to wait for that. Um, but it was well built in the sense that like it kept changing tempos and keeping you on your toes, and it didn't sort of extend things by sort of 8 or 60 bars. Actually, it kind of moved organically from one idea to the other quite nicely. And I really enjoyed the riff at the 2/3 mark, that circular rotation riff. I thought that was probably the highlight of the record. Um, if you head to the next full song, Fenjan, with the vaguely Eastern riffs with the groove laden opening, which is musical and enjoyable. It needed a shift earlier for me, though. I felt like I was waiting a little too long on that one. The verse was like a welcome change. I thought it was better at the back end with some hardcore style vocals at
Yeah,
moments.
it felt really out of whack for me. And
Mm.
the whole opening of that felt like they were jamming in the studio, and then they went back to being to remember that they're like, oh, this is what our band kind of does. Like
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
all
Kind of
that
sort of
like
taking a left turn a little bit.
widdly twiddly guitar that then they then kick it back in. And then when they do, because they did it on Death No More as well, where they did when they got to that point where they did like a beat down kind of chuggy riffs, it was proper like stompy vibes. I was like, yes, like when it got to that in both of those songs, brilliant. But that was another one that the interlude into Fenjan, or how do you pronounce it, was totally disconnected. It kind of threw me. I was like, I am
Yeah, yeah.
super interested to see where this goes. It's really atmospheric, like to the point where like the quality seems a little bit different. I feel like this is really well produced, and then intentionally, which they talk about, the actual songs themselves are kind of they wanted them to be as in the room as possible,
Mm.
recorded in a more raw kind of way. Yeah, it's an interesting style choice.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And then you ended up sort of with that final section, with Timekeeper heading into Crux and Sarta, which is a nice riff.
That's my yeah, that's
Felt
my
like the
favorite
arrival of a
song on
bad
the
guy in a
album.
fantasy movie. It was very black metal vocals.
Yeah,
Um, this person should voice trolls in Lord of the Rings films, like for the rest of his career. The vocals were genuinely like eye-opening. They were like, oh my God, how is one person capable of these noises?
I loved that.
Uh,
So that Crux Ansata was my favorite song on the album. There was like so much more vocal variance. It was really powerful in parts. Some of it was really quite jarring, but and it felt like there was no prolonged, overdrawn intro. It kicked straight into that really cool riff, and then it just got going. And then there's that like psychedelic solo at the end, and yeah, it was brilliant. I love that song. Liked it a
Yeah,
lot.
I enjoyed that as well. I thought that was one of the highlights of the record. I really enjoyed the lead to finish the because that was that the when it sort of kicks into its highest gear for me is that when there's a multitude of guitar work going on, when there's like an actual lead passage and then the sludge in the background has something to complement it, where it feels like when it's on its own, it has a chance of getting kind of repetitive. And then that leads us to Chronoclasm. So I just wrote for this, opting for ambience, but does it go anywhere? Question mark. I was yet to find an answer even at the 9 minute 50-second mark, to be honest with you. Like it felt like it was kind of getting to third gear and spluttering back down and then getting up a little bit and then sort of fading away. It kind of felt like it was more of an attempt to set a mood and an atmosphere and a tone rather than really truly achieve anything from a structured standpoint. Now, as far as 10-minute songs go, I'm much more catered to with that than yourself. So I'm going to assume that somewhere around the 5 minute mark, you were contemplating driving into fellow passengers on the motorway.
I didn't even
So
have the strength to do that.
where do you sit with this final tune?
It was an unfortunate situation for me where on the track listing on my phone when I'd said no, this is important. So obviously I put it on the in the car and for listed number one, and I thought that Awakening, that last little
Hmm.
interlude, was the final track. So I'm buzzing off Crux Ansata. I'm like, yes, this is that. It feels like it's hit the sweet spot for me for what this band are trying to achieve. Love that. Then it kicks into Awakening. I'm like, weird choice. 22-second interlude to finish your album. Just attach it onto the end. Don't understand. And then I see the track listing tick over and I see like 10 minutes and 44 seconds. And I was like, excuse me, that is not okay. So I was on the back foot from the start. But when you're hitting me with 6 minutes of like this, oh, like, I mean, as you said with Siamese, that was not made for me. And whereas the rest of this album, I found enough of a challenging and in a good way and kind of interesting listen throughout. Gone, totally gone at this point. They've ruined everything for me. So thanks a lot for everything. Yeah, you've gone and ruined everything. Yeah, it was just it was if you'd have asked me what I'd have thought about this genre before I'd listened to the rest of the tracks that they before this, it's kind of this is what I would have told you, and I just for someone that loves melodies and hooks and needs to find something to get drawn into music, I felt like there was none of that throughout the whole of this. Now, I'm absolutely sure that that wasn't the intention. And this is an absolute bananas record. So, you know, the fact that they've done that is probably them doing it just because they can. Um, and just because it kind of captures whatever it is that they're trying to bring into this concept, which is absolutely fair enough. But in terms of from my listenership, challenging in a bad way. But
Yeah,
we got there.
I can't argue that.
I mean, the last 2 minutes kind of it kicks up again. You know, it does something relevant, but it did that. It was one of the worst. I almost got to the point where I was expecting in every song, okay, here come the final 2 minutes. Let's see what they do with this. They've done the intro now. Let's see what happens. And every time I was pleasantly surprised. And then it got to this, and I was like, well, that's the worst of all of them. And you've taken 8 minutes to get there. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's if it was an album full of 10-minute chroniclasms, I'd been beside myself. But we'll give them that blip on the end. Oh, lucky they put it on the end as well. Otherwise, it would put me in a right old spin before.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's the thing where it becomes a matter of subjective taste. But objectively speaking, needs some structure, lads. You know, like there if this is intended to be taken as anything other than a jam session featuring some indecipherable lyrics about time. If I'm supposed to take it more seriously than that, then you have to work a little bit harder on the structuring of ideas together. And if I don't get it, that's okay. And if I'm not expected to be part of the audience associated with this, and they just want to appeal to a group of folks who are just like, yeah, the riff's heavy, and that's all I need. That's fine. That's fine. But I found myself aching for a bit of structure and aching for a little bit of consistency in the way that they brought some of these ideas together, because it felt like um, sort of loose, sludgy ideas sort of sewn together. And this final one, they sacrifice structure for ambience to the point where it's not that they've sacrificed structure for ambience to the point where there's very little structure. There's almost none at all. Where it just sounded like a cacophony of sound, rather than actually like a song with a thesis or an argument or a point to make or anything like that. So for me, it might be a question of taste. You put somebody in here who's really into this specific type of music, and they can tell me that it's a masterpiece within that genre. But I'm not entirely sure that it is, and I'm not entirely sure it does enough from a structural or a songwriting standpoint to sew some of these ideas together. It felt a bit haphazard at times, and it felt a bit disjointed at times. And at the moments that were at its best, where there were points to make and things to do and places to get to, and everyone was singing from the same hymn sheet, and there was layers and ideas and those kind of things competing with each other. But at its worst here, it kind of sounded like we're just playing for the sake of playing, and we're going on to the next idea when it suits us. And maybe they're like a Grateful Dead style sort of jam band mixed in with this sort of sludgy and heavy stuff. And in which case, I need to just take it for what it is rather than criticizing it for what it isn't. But um, I can't I can't see any other way than to just point out that there are some massive flaws in the way that they organize these ideas and the way that they try and connect one song to another. Um, you know, sort of that's some obvious flaws for me. But again, maybe that comes in from what your initial expectations are of this kind of genre. But I'm of the opinion that progressive doesn't need to mean indecipherable. Um, I was talking to a friend as well yesterday, and he said unique doesn't necessarily mean good, and that's true. And this reminds me of that, just because it can be complicated and impressive and talented and interesting and unique, but it can also be not good. Those things can all be true. And that's what I end up feeling like when I'm coming out of this, is that it is interesting and ambient and unique and progressive and complicated, but I'm not entirely sure that it fulfills that final box of, is it really going to pull in new fans? Is it going to cement them within what they're trying to achieve, if they are trying to achieve anything beyond something very niche? So it's
Damn,
hard for me to just sort of,
did I enjoy it more than you?
yeah, you definitely did, yeah.
That's fucking wild.
You definitely did, because it does it's like when you read bits of, like you did this, you did the audiobooks, like when you read bits about Tolkien and there's like 14 pages describing a song,
Mm.
and it's like, this is a great story, can we just get to it?
Yeah.
Like
It's weird,
these
isn't
this
it, that I
they
can,
have great guitar tone and some very good vocals. Can we
yeah,
just do more of that? Does there have to be 3.5 minutes of echoey little build up that leads to nowhere, like musical foreplay? Like, it just, I don't know. I listened to it and I was just massively unsatisfied by the whole approach.
that's wild. I'd be really interested to see what the likes of Dan Hillier of Noizze fame, and Will Marshall of Noizze and other fame, uh, and Adam kind of think of this. Because they feel to me like the people that this is aimed towards. Like, it doesn't feel like it's aimed towards us, and it sits within a category of music that is the likes of the band that you'd find at ArcTanGent, and you would find a couple of thousand people in a tent absolutely loving 10
Mhm.
minutes of song that is somewhat it's interesting, isn't it, to understand what this would translate like live. I
Mm.
imagine as a trio they probably managed to do quite a lot.
And I imagine my criticisms would be somebody else's compliments.
Right, yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Like the
Yeah.
lack of structure is exciting for some listeners, and interesting and engaging. And
And I imagine Born of Obsidian probably. I mean, I've heard of the band. We've raved about them. We called it a crucial listening, so I can only assume whoever in Noise reviewed it absolutely felt that. Uh, and this to me feels like it's probably continuing that, but pushing it even further. So I imagine for what they're trying to achieve and within their demographic, it's probably gonna do bits.
I imagine so. And this is the thing. This is the nature of music, and it's hard. It's subjective. And I can imagine there are a lot of people within the world that this is aimed towards that would be, really appreciative that this is coming out, and really enjoy it. And I wish them and Siamese every success of what they're trying to achieve with both these records. That's going to bring us to a close. We've actually done 45 minutes of noise in under 45 minutes. We're currently at 42 and a half, which I'm quite impressed with.
Just a reminder that the Noizze Podcast, not Sam and myself, but the Noizze Podcast will be playing, talking live at ArcTanGent Festival. That is right. Yet again, we filled in a slot last year, and we've been asked to come back, and we are mind blown that would happen. We had about 50 odd people turn up last year, which was for 9 o'clock in the morning. It yeah, blew our minds, and it was absolutely amazing. Will and Adam are big uh, in the ArcTanGent scene. That's such a thing. We play directly before Two Promoters One Podcast, or Two Promoters One Pod, which is an absolutely amazing podcast run by festival organizer James Scarlett, and by Damnation Festival organizer Gavin McNally. And yeah, it's going to be great. I have also managed to get the day off work and have a guest pass to go on that day, so I'm going to be able to watch the lads do their thing, and it's going to be really cool. We're going to have a couple of guests. We'll announce it soon. So yeah, if you're at ArcTanGent Festival, I think the stage is called the Elephant in the Bar Room. God, I think I butchered that. It's Elephant in Somewhere stage, and we'll be playing there at 9 o'clock. So if you are up and you want to hear us talk to a couple of guys at the festival, I can't reveal anything yet, but we're going to be doing that. And if you see us, come and say hi. We will have some merch available at ArcTanGent as well. So if you want some of our death metal hoodies and t-shirts, go and grab them. They'll be there for most of the weekend as well. Yeah, that would be much appreciated.
I'd like to thank Jac for joining me. Jac will be continuing to join me for the next couple of weeks. I'd like to ask that you follow us on all the relevant socials. We have a Twitter account at Noizze Podcast, and we also have Facebook groups and YouTube. Please subscribe. That's the best way to support us. Give us a 5-star on Spotify too if you get a chance.
You're going to give it the "We love you" bye. We love you. Bye. No.
We love you. Bye.
Oh, that's cute.